All revolutions start when people can't afford food, period. That's what revolutions are all about.
Hi, I'm Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and this is the Miles Franklin Weekly Special for October 25th through November 1st, 2022, while supplies last. This week we feature two silver specials. First, we have 90% silver at $11.49 over spot. Prized for its recognizability, liquidity, and easy divisibility, constitutional or junk silver is also in short supply. As Andy Schechtman says, they're not making any more of it. Our 90% silver is mixed, meaning it may come as dimes, quarters, or both, but it has the same silver content either way and is available at $11.49 over spot while this batch lasts. Our second silver special is 100-ounce PAMP Swiss silver bars. Known for their quality and artistry, PAMP makes these IRA-eligible bars 3 nines fine, and with their own individual serial numbers. They come 5 to a box and are available at only $4.59 over spot. Our number for all orders is 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.
Hey everyone, this is Elijah K. Johnson with Liberty and Finance. And back with us today is our good friend Bob Moriarty. Bob, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, I would like to say it's a pleasure, but watching the news is a bit disconcerting.
It definitely is disconcerting, and I know the last time that we had you on, you were talking about how really things are coming to a head right now. We could be heading into a financial collapse that everyone will notice in the next couple months. And you said, things that could happen are, for example, like bank closures, and it'll just have a huge impact on everyone financially. Can you expand on some new signposts that you've been seeing that are just confirming that, yes, we are heading into this financial crash?
Okay, strange enough, I sent you 2 articles about social disorder around the world: Sri Lanka, Panama, Peru, Ecuador, Haiti, Pakistan, Argentina, Tunisia, Kenya, Albania, Uganda, and Nigeria. Those are in third world nations, but in the first world, France, Netherlands, Germany, Italy, Spain, Poland, Norway. It's scary, okay? The German biggest union is going to start strikes shortly, and I think they're asking for an 8% increase in wages, and frankly, it's not enough. The things have been put in motion for far higher prices, so inflation is going to run out of control. And I don't think it has anything to do with the Fed. I don't think the Fed can do anything about it.
That does bring us to how we are seeing a Fed meeting this week, and they're looking to raise rates again, and the Fed funds rate would then be, near 4%. Your perspective on that? Why is it that, regardless of what the Fed does, this isn't going to impact inflation?
Well, it will impact inflation. What it's not going to impact, it's not going to impact the economy, because if they raise interest rates, we end up with deflation, and the economy crashes. And if they don't raise interest rates, we end up with hyperinflation and the economy crashes. And the analogy that I use, it's like discussing the difference between dying of a heart attack and dying of lung cancer. And frankly, it's dying that's important. It's not how you die. The world economy, and the only guy who absolutely gets it is Putin. The debt-based system is past its expiration date. It's going to blow up. When you pick up a balloon, and it doesn't make any difference what the size of the balloon is, if you keep blowing into it, the one thing that you know is sooner or later it's going to blow up. The one thing that you don't know is when it's going to blow up. But I'm seeing a lot of signs. Are you familiar with the people at PayPal, what they just came out with? They have changed their rules. And if they find you guilty of being involved in misinformation, they reserve the right to take $2,500 from you, and you have no recourse. And I, for the life of me, can't see the difference between that and stealing. And when I read that, I thought, look, I don't use PayPal that much anyway. I'll go cancel my account. But they actually make it next to impossible to cancel your account. But this is exactly the direction the World Economic Forum is going, that you either adhere to the straight and narrow, or we will cut you off financially. And that's very scary. I've never heard of anything like that. What kind of private corporation has the right to steal $2,500 from their customers?
I know last time you mentioned how there could be bank closures, and a lot of people who are calling to purchase precious metals, they're concerned about their money in their bank. It seems like there's this growing concern of the safety of the banking system. And one thing you just mentioned with PayPal is, well, maybe it could be under the the seizure of funds could be under some sort of it seems to be a good thing. We're trying to prevent misinformation and stuff like that. Your perspective on the safety of funds in the banks right now and what could happen to them in the future?
I can't talk about the safety of funds in the banking system. There isn't any. Okay. If you got money in a bank, you have loaned money to the bank. And if the bank goes under, you lose your money. Now, they'll probably have some kind of bail-in like they did with Cyprus, but banks have two assets, okay? When they talk about XYZ Bank has $500 billion in assets, they got two assets. One is the loans that they've made, which are all long-term, and the other is short-term, which is bonds and governments and bonds in other banks. So literally, in 1931, the Credit Anstalt Bank in Austria went bankrupt, and it started a series of cascading defaults throughout the world. And then in 1933, when Roosevelt took over, he declared a banking holiday. But some Friday, they're going to close the banks, and they won't reopen on Monday. It has to happen, because the world can't pay the debt off that exists. And everything the government is doing, it's increasing the debt, making it more dangerous. So let me give you some numbers. In the United States, the top-rated bonds are down 47% since January 1st. In the UK, where this whole thing blew up, they were down 52.3%. The Fed and Treasury have been pumping money into the Swiss National Bank, and the Swiss National Bank is pumping it into Credit Suisse and probably 10 or 15 other banks. The banking system in the world is teetering on the head of a pin. Now, you're in a position where you have vested interest. Okay, you work for a company that wants to sell gold and silver. That makes you biased, okay? I don't make a penny by gold and silver going up or gold and silver going down. I only make money when I make investments that actually make sense. And when I tell readers of my books or of my website, I give them valuable information. I have to earn my keep every single day. And I'll be candid, anybody who can't put their hands on 6 months' funds, and I mean physically in their hands, is making a terrible mistake.
Now, you mentioned there could be bail-ins coming. What else do you think could happen to people's funds in the bank?
They can go to money heaven.
And what does that mean? Because it's like, it seems like there would be riots in the street, right? If you just saw a bank went down and people can't get their funds.
Elijah. We've already got riots in the street, okay? I just told you 17 different countries, there's riots right now. Wintertime is approaching in Europe, and it's starting to get cold. But let me give you some of the numbers that I run into. I've got a small farm here, and I've got a pellet stove, and the pellets are up 200% over last year. At the mill, I use these little Japanese kerosene stoves, and kerosene is up 150%. And then I thought, gee, I wonder what the cost of firewood is. And I went to a store today, a hardware store, and they've got these bags. You know, it's not a big bag, a little bag, a bag of enough firewood for one evening. You know, it's 10 euros. I thought, who can afford that? And the answer is not very many. We are absolutely going to have chaos. It's starting now. The Europeans have woken up to the fact that the sanctions are incredibly stupid, and they're actually an attack by the United States on Europe. And they're saying, we don't want any part of this, and we don't want any part of the sanctions. We don't want any part of the war against Ukraine. And Russia is not the enemy. Russia is the next door neighbor for Europe. Why would they not want to get along with Russia? If people would listen, and nobody does this, all of your listeners, if they think the United States is wonderful and doing everything right, they should read what Putin has said lately. And he said we're coming up to a very important decade where things are going to change tremendously. Putin understands it. Biden and the neocons are absolutely, utterly clueless.
And so you mentioned that Putin is saying that things are going to change dramatically. What ways do you think things are going to change?
Okay, well, we're going to go from a unipolar war where the United States rules and makes all the decisions to a multipolar war where other people get to make decisions too. This, of course, is why the United States is being so stupid. Right now, the United States has declared Russia to be the enemy, and China, and Nicaragua, and Venezuela, and Cuba, and now Saudi Arabia, and Iran. Okay, how many enemies can the United States actually cope with at one time? Now, you know, I was in the military for 6 years, and I was in Vietnam for 2 years. The people that we fought were incredibly brave, and they were equipped with small arms, okay, and we had B-52s, and we had all the weapons in the world, and they still whipped us. When the United States went into Afghanistan for 20 years, it spent $2.3 trillion. The average employment of an Afghan warrior, he was a goat herder. When you walk into a barn, a goat herder kicks your butt. Don't walk into a barn and start running your mouth.
So in your perspective, I guess, where does that lead the U.S.? Because we're looking at a multipolar world now.
Strange enough, and that's a really good question. I like that. Every empire, every country with a world's reserve currency gets it for about 80 years. We've had it since 1944, so we've had it for 78 years. It is the natural flow of things, the ebb and tide. The United States is going to change dramatically. I cannot believe that we are treating China as the enemy, because all China has to do is say, okay, we're not going to send you any more cheap Chinese crap, and the United States economy falls apart. 77% of the U.S. economy is based around goods and services, and 20% of the U.S. economy is based on financial. It's like having an economy based on an Indian casino, and that's not an economy. You need to produce something of value. You need to create. You need to manufacture. You need to grow things. And Joe Biden, quite bluntly, is trying to destroy the U.S. economy, and he's succeeding.
It does seem like what we're seeing right now is the destruction of the economy. And if we can bring this conversation, I guess, back to where we started of how it's going to impact the average person, we could see, as you mentioned in your view, that we could see bank closures or bail-ins. What are other things that could happen, as you're saying, the timeline possibly in the next couple of months that everyone will see? Okay,
inflation, it's not only going to continue, it's going to get worse. We're going to simultaneously have deflation of some things like the stock market, the bond market, and housing, and we're going to have inflation of other things such as food and energy. Now, there's a lot of people who believe that weather modification is very important and has a major impact in the United States. I'm not going to say I subscribe to that. However, the drought in the West has been terrible. The Central Valley of California produces something like 75 or 80% of all the tomatoes in the United States, and they have a 98% drought rating right now. Food shortages are going to go through the roof. The Mississippi River is so shallow that the grain barges and coal barges can't get down the river. So there's going to be shortages of food, and the food that you can get is going to cost a lot more money. And I believe the same thing's going to be true of energy. I think it's going to be oil, natural gas. It's going to go up a lot.
And it does seem like that's what we're seeing is an incredible increase in prices there. One thing that I did want to touch on, and you already did mention a bit, was how the war in Ukraine is making this all worse. We've talked about this before, how the sanctions have really backfired. You mentioned how a lot of European countries are actually wanting out of NATO because they're seeing the backfiring of these sanctions and how the war is making inflation worse. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, and I'm happy to do that. I wrote a piece on March 1st, and I said sanctions were suicide for the U.S., for the EU, and for the euro. And I meant that. And everybody's using the term now. The one thing that's absolutely crystal clear is the sanctions have boomeranged on Europe and created enormous problems for Europe. But they haven't done any damage to Russia. And that's just so silly. I'm so disgusted with Europe that nobody has stood up and said, look, we're going to try leadership for a change. If you do something stupid, just stop doing it. It's still okay to hate Putin. It's still okay to send your military to fight him. It's still okay to support the Nazis in Ukraine. But why would you cut your throat by not allowing food or fuel or fertilizer? And it's totally insane. I simply don't understand why they've been so stupid.
And I mean, it seems like some of the people who haven't been are the people who are rising up against this. What kind of impact will that have in Europe?
All revolutions start when people can't afford food, period. That's what revolutions are all about. The people are starting to revolt, and this is exactly what I predicted back in 2016 in the book that I wrote called The Art of Peace, saying that when the banking system collapses, and it is collapsing now, it's not a question of whether it's going to collapse. It is collapsing right now. Here's what I want your listeners to understand. There is no food crisis. There is no fuel crisis. There is no fertilizer crisis. There is only a misallocation due to stupidity. The highest the Russians have ever produced in history was 135 million bushels. It's either bushels or tons of grain. Okay, this year they have produced 150 million tons or bushels or whatever they measured in. Russia has plenty of fuel. And here's where it really gets interesting. The United States blew up Nord Stream in order to remove the ability for the German government to realize that not getting gas from Russia was bad for Germany. They're shutting down hundreds of businesses in Germany right now, okay? So they can't afford the fuel. So when they blew up Nord Stream, there were 4 pipes, and they only blew up 3 of them. Nord Stream 2 still has a pipe that could still have gas flowing through into Germany tomorrow. And there's something I didn't write a piece, but I posted a piece a week ago by a very good, big commodity company. And they said, due to the nature of LNG, when you fill a cavern up, which is where they store natural gas for its use in the wintertime, LNG, you can't recover as much LNG as you can natural gas. Now, please don't ask me to explain it because I didn't understand it. However, the natural gas caverns in Europe are 90, 92, 94%. So they're okay now. But come December, when they've got the maximum drawdown, where are they going to get the gas then? Blixen, who's an absolute airhead, if there ever was one, said that blowing up Nord Stream was a tremendous opportunity for the United States. And what he didn't say, and that's what the Europeans understand, it gives the United States the ability to sell natural gas in the form of LNG at 4 to 7 times the price that Americans are paying. So the United States is just interjecting enormous chaos into a system that was already broken. Okay? If there were any leaders in Europe, and there aren't, they would say, we need to sit down with Russia, we need to listen to Putin, we need to see what his complaints are, and see if there's any mutual agreement there. If they did that, the war could end tomorrow. Putin wants to end this war. The United States and NATO want it to continue, and that's so stupid. I mean, we're a day, week, month away from a nuclear war. For what? For getting NATO into Ukraine? I don't think it's worth it.
I guess if we could turn back, though, to the banking system, you mentioned how cracks are appearing right now. Can you enlighten us kind of some of the cracks that you're seeing right now?
Well, certainly the Swiss National Bank went to the Fed and said, we need money. And I can't tell you what the total is, but the Swiss National Bank has gotten tens of billions of dollars from the Fed. It's not all going to Credit Suisse. The Fed cannot give money to Credit Suisse. They can give money to the Swiss National Bank that can give money to Credit Suisse. So it's a technical issue. But the Swiss National Bank is actually handing out, well, it's Halloween today. Okay, all the banks are getting their Halloween candy. But the problem with that is that money has to come from somewhere. And it's inherently inflation, and we've already got an inflation problem. So the banking system is on tenterhooks now. The value of their bonds have plummeted by about 50% in the last 10 months, and they're in far worse shape than anybody wants to admit. So one day soon, they're going to close.
So it seems like what you're saying is that the value of the assets the banks hold has decreased so much that something has to happen, and the funds maybe come from the depositors, or what is the connection between the assets that the banks are holding, that the value of those decreasing, and the banks closing?
Okay, that's a good question. Let me explain to you how banks work. Banks make money by lending long. They get the money to lend by borrowing short. So when you go into a bank and you put money into a savings account or you put money into a checking account, you think the money is yours. but it is not yours. You have made a loan to the bank, and if the bank goes under, you're nothing but another creditor, okay? Because of the inherent nature of lending long and borrowing short, every bank ever created is subject to the risk of a bank seizure, a bank closing because of a run on the bank. Now, that's what happened in 1931 through 1933. I highly suspect it's happening right now behind the scenes, or the Fed wouldn't be pumping billions of dollars into Switzerland. I mean, the Swiss used to have the hardest currency in the world. Who ever heard of the Swiss losing money? They're smart people. How can they lose money? So the banks are getting whacked two ways. One is with low interest rates. They're not making money on the loans. And the other is the value of the assets, the bonds that they own, have decreased 50% in value. If a bond goes down 50% in value, what kind of return does it take to bring it back?
100%.
100%. Okay. And they ain't see that. Okay. That ain't going to happen. Now, I happen to believe that right now, we're probably going to have a little bounce in bonds. We're probably going to have a little bounce in the stock market. But, it's like taking a corpse and pumping it up with helium. Then just because it starts levitating doesn't mean it's alive. The banking system is functionally bankrupt, and one day, very soon, people are going to realize it. And I don't make a penny for saying that.
I think that's a very good point there. And so when it comes to what could happen, some people might say that, well, there's FDIC insurance up to $250,000 in the banking system. So, even if the bank goes insolvent, I'm still insured by the government. Your perspective on that?
Okay. Are you seriously asking me the value of a government guarantee? You ever play Monopoly? If you got to be the bank, was there any way you could ever lose? No. They can pay you back, but they're going to pay you back in Monopoly money. What'll actually happen, I think, will be exactly what happened at Cyprus. You got 100,000 euros in the bank. You go down to the bank says, okay, we're going to allow you to take out 100 euros a day, and we're going to turn 90% of what you've got into stock in the bank. What do? Okay. And you can go to the FDIC and say, hey, I lost money. And the FDIC is going to say, well, look at that. You got all these shares in the stock. Those shares used to be worth something. Maybe someday they will. I was told that when I was a kid about Confederate money. Save your Confederate money. Maybe it'll be worth something someday.
So is your thought then to have assets kind of outside of the system? Because it seems like, even by its nature, electronic assets can fall to zero, and all currencies can fall to zero. So even just looking at this on a philosophical level, it seems like it's good to have assets outside the banking system. But with things as they are right now, it seems like the proportion of assets should even be more heavily outside the banking system as they would be normally.
The governments are going to do whatever they perceive is in their best interest. When Russia invaded Ukraine, the United States, NATO, and the EU seized $600 billion. And that's what Russia thought they had in the system, and they didn't have anything. Likewise with PayPal. PayPal saying, you think you own your bank account, but you don't own your bank account. We do.
When you're putting money in the bank, you are lending it to them. It's no longer yours, correct?
Correct. It's yours in theory, but you are a creditor. You have loaned money to the bank, and very few people understand that. But what I will tell you, and we certainly saw this in 2008, there were all kinds of legal requirements. If you took out a mortgage, do you know what a wet signature is on a mortgage?
Enlighten us.
Okay, you've taken a pen out and you signed a piece of paper. Many of the states in the United States required wet signatures the mortgage should be transferred to another institution. And while all these tens of billions of dollars in mortgages disappeared, the courts just said, well, gee, that's really too bad. Because the problem was the mortgages were put together in packages of, say, $100 million. And then the $100 million was broke up into 15 pieces and sold to other institutions. So literally, no one place held the mortgage. Everybody held the mortgage. And the one thing that I'll guarantee is, and you can take this to the bank and cash it, is the United States and the banking system is going to end up just fine. They're going to go broke, okay? But they're all going to be sitting pretty. If you go back to December of 2008, when Bank of America took over Merrill Lynch, 3 days before Merrill Lynch declared bankruptcy, the board of Merrill Lynch gave everybody Christmas bonuses. So basically, the system is rigged, and it's rigged against small investors, and you either do something to protect your assets. Now, I'm not saying take 100% of your money out of the bank and put it into gold coins and shove it under the bed. I'm saying have some physical gold or silver or platinum that you put your hands on so you're safe for 6 months or so. It's an insurance policy. Gold is not an investment 100% of the time. Some of the time, it's nothing but an insurance policy. You got insurance on your house, you got insurance on your car, you may have insurance on you. Why wouldn't you have insurance on your money?
I think that's very key for our viewers listening. Is it's not a call to take all your funds out of the banking system, because obviously we need funds in there to live, just to operate in our daily life. But having a portion of that outside the system is very imperative. And we can't give financial advice, but just on the basis itself that there is third-party risk there, and we don't know what the future holds. And having something in your own possession or held by a trusted depository, it's so important because you're taking funds outside of the system.
Well, here's the key: banks have reserves, corporations have reserves, governments have reserves. Why wouldn't you have reserves as an individual? And the fact is, this idea of the government's always going to take care of you. The government's going to take care of you, but that's not a good thing. That's a bad thing.
It definitely seems like when the government takes care of us, it just reduces the amount of liberty we have and enslaves us in a sense. But Bob Moriarty, before we let you go, any last thoughts before we let you go, and where can our viewers find you online?
They can find me at 321 Gold and 321 Energy. And I've actually released 2 books in the last couple of weeks. They can go to Amazon and put in Robert Moriarty. And I've got a couple more pretty good books. And strange enough, the books are so cheap that if people don't read them and they don't have some idea of what to do with their money in the future, they're making a real serious mistake. I mean, for $10, you're going to learn something.
And we'll put that link in the description of this video to your websites and also the Amazon author page so they can check out your books there. Bob, once again, thank you so much for your time as always, and God bless.
Super deal. Thank you, sir.
Miles Franklin Precious Metals is one of America's oldest and most trusted bullion dealers. Miles Franklin is A+ rated and accredited by the Better Business Bureau, licensed and bonded, and has 0 complaints ever registered. Here at Liberty and Finance, we are licensed brokers with Miles Franklin. To order, simply call us, discuss your needs, and we will let you know our live inventory, prices, and availability, and lock in your order over the phone. Once your order is locked, the price is held for you regardless of market fluctuations, and the metals are reserved for you awaiting your settled payment. Within 1 business day of ordering, you will receive an email invoice detailing the order and payment instructions. Miles Franklin accepts payments by bank wire, ACH or electronic check, money order, check mailed priority mail, and cryptocurrency. The fastest forms of payment are bank wire and cryptocurrency. Upon settled payment, metals will ship out within 3 to 5 business days. You will receive tracking information via email. Domestic shipping charges are $15 for any order under 500 ounces of silver or 10 ounces of gold. For orders larger than that, domestic shipping is free. The package will be double boxed, fully insured, and labeled discreetly, with no indication of the contents inside. For your privacy, the name Miles Franklin will not even be on the package. To talk to myself, Elijah, my brother Kaiser, or my father Dunnigan, call 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237.